Good evening and welcome to the Coon Rapids City Council meeting for Tuesday, October 17th, 2017. We have special guests this evening from Cub Scout Pack 419. If you could please rise and the boys will come up and lead us in the pledge. Come on, guys.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Why don't you guys stay there a second? As long as you came all the way in here, why don't you turn and face out. In fact, let's back up here, because what's going to happen is somebody is going to want to take a picture of you in front of the city council. So turn around, and if you would just introduce yourself. You're all from the Cub Scout Pack 419, and you're here to earn a badge of some sort, right? So maybe you could just introduce yourself, and if somebody wants to just tell us what it is you're here working on.
My name is Brady Lucan.
My name is Aiden Emery.
My name is Grant Power.
My name is Soren Nelson.
My name is Jordan Erickson.
My name is Josiah Fixon.
My name is Carrie Lucan, and I am the den leader for this wonderful den. We are working on our Build a Better World badge, which includes meeting with the wonderful mayor today and being able to present in front of you. So thank you so much for having us.
Wow. You didn't have to call me that, but thank you. Thanks for coming, guys.
Your official title is now wonderful.
All right, please call the roll.
Councilmember Griscoviac.
Here.
Councilmember Kicker.
Here.
Councilmember Demmer. Councilmember Geisler.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Wells.
Here.
Mayor Cook.
Here.
One absent, Demmer.
Thank you. Next thing on our agenda is to adopt this evening's agenda.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second. Motion by Wells, second by Kicker. Any discussion or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? And the agenda is adopted. And our very first thing under proclamations and presentations, and I'm pretty sure we're not doing a proclamation, is the Anoka Hennepin School District Fit for the Future referendum presentation from Mr. Chuck Holden. Great to see you, Chuck.
Mr. Mayor, council members, staff, and residents, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here tonight. And I wanted to talk to you about the upcoming referendum for the school district. And what a great segue having the Cub Scouts here and knowing that they're attending schools that we want to do a lot of work on. So I'd like to start out with just a short video and then go on to some of the details of the referendum.
We've seen a whole different new part of excitement, both with the city of Coon Rapids and with all of our community members in general.
Yeah.
Facilities are linked to learning. It is really important for the kids to be in an environment that shows that and puts all of that together.
Coon Rapids in particular, we have a number of buildings that were built in the 1960s. And frankly, designs have changed for school buildings for a number of reasons, not least of which is the safety and security of the students.
We don't have a large gathering space. When you walk into our school, where you walk into a wall, it's not very welcoming, and it's not secure for our evening functions as well.
The way the city is now is that the front entrance needs to be moved to a safer location.
You want the facility to feel like the kids deserve this. And we want the kids to feel like, you know what, you deserve the cutting edge, the premier facilities, and we do need some updates.
We've got a long history of asking our community to give us input about what they expect from our schools. And right now our community has told us there's a need for space, and there's really a need for safety.
Residents of Anoka Hennepin will have the opportunity to make district schools fit for the future by addressing facility needs for students and the community. The ballot will have two questions. The first question would provide funds for operating expenses to keep class sizes low and run the new spaces. Question 2 would fund construction and renovation projects to meet safety, space, and maintenance needs across the district. Voters would need to approve question 1 in order for question 2 to pass.
We are standing in front of one of our 2 portables. This is the larger of the 2. The smaller portable is actually a 3rd grade class, so we have an entire class of 3rd graders that are not with their grade level. The building itself is in need of repair. We have critters that have lived under this portable. Inside the portable, it's not a level floor. Our science teacher has quite a few challenges trying to keep things on the table and not roll off the table.
Media centers from the 80s, from the 90s, even from the early 2000s, should look different than they do now, specifically in relation to how we infuse technology to support our learners.
We need modern buildings that fit with modern learning. The school buildings are central to how people think and feel about their community.
The tax impact for the average Anoka Hennepin homeowner would be about $11 per month. Get the facts about the referendum by visiting the district website and make sure to vote on or before November 7th.
So what I wanted to talk about, and we appreciate Chief Wise starring in our video, but he was a member of our task force, so I'll talk a little bit about that. So what I want to talk about tonight is just an overview of what's been happening with the school district and our facilities and the planning process, focus areas, including concepts, plans specifically for Coon Rapids, our financial information, voting information, and then stand for any questions. So just a brief overview. We've graduated more than 3,000 students in the school district last year. 8 out of 10, 80% of our seniors took 2 or more college credit courses. We're very proud of that. Majority of scores, saving our families and our parents a lot of money. Majority of our scores on state tests are above the state average at all levels. Students are in traditionally underserved groups are more likely to exceed in Anoka Hennepin. Several schools in our school district have been named magnet schools of distinction or excellence each year for a number of years. Families and community members continually have positive responses on the school district. 89% rate the quality of education in Anoka Hennepin as excellent or good, 31% excellent. Over 85% of our parents think we provide great options for our students and that their learning needs are met, and 90% approve our teachers who do a fantastic job. And a history, because we get questions from the public and some of our parents saying, well, you're coming back to us for money again. And actually, we haven't had a construction bond for almost 20 years. 1999 was our last bond when we built Champlain Park High School and Rum River Elementary School and Oxbow Creek Elementary School at that time. So it's if this referendum 3 weeks from today is successful, it'll be 20 years. It'll be 2019 school year that these projects would start to come to fruition. So really a 20-year period. We did have an operating referendum in 2007 to maintain programs, lower class sizes, and improve high school activities. So what's been happening? For almost 10 years ago, we started a process to downsize our schools because at that time, demographers were telling us what we were seeing with the Depression. 2007, 2008, we were losing students. Our population was going down. There was no growth. So we had a task force at that time that closed and repurposed schools. And one of the questions I get all the time is, well, if you have growth again, just reopen those schools. Those schools are all full. If you drive down Northdale Boulevard to Soderberg Early Childhood Center, you'll see the parents and buses there. It's full of 4-year-old programming. Riverview Elementary is the other early childhood school on the other side of the district. Elo Jacob is now River Trails at Elo Jacob is a level 4 special needs school that we really need to expand because it's got 110 students in it. So our schools are full. We did sell the school district office on Hanson Boulevard to the Hmong Alliance Church, and they've done fantastic things with that. And we moved our district office in with our Ferry Street staff to consolidate and save money, frankly. And then we did sell Champlin Elementary School on the other side of the river because it needed so many repairs, and it was a multi-level school, not handicap accessible. So we made some consolidation, but the schools in the district are full. So at this time, what's happened is we've got growth again in the school district. The economy is coming back, people are moving into our area, and we're feeling the pinch. So the school board commissioned a 32-member task force, and Chief Wise was on that task force along with myself and many members of our staff that were basically giving our community members, our parents and community leaders information on the school district, on financing, on facilities, on age of our buildings. And they met for almost, well, from April till January and really did a crash course. The meetings were usually 4 hours long. They toured all of our buildings and made recommendations to the school board, 9 recommendations. After the board got those recommendations last spring, they had meetings and talked to the public to get ideas on the plans, and myself and our staff worked on concepts to honor those recommendations from the task force. The main focus areas of the recommendations were to provide safe and secure learning environments, provide space for our growing student populations, maintain quality schools, improve science labs, media centers, and flexible learning spaces for our kids, and then address class size. So one of the concepts, Coon Rapids High School, we eliminated the portable classrooms at Coon Rapids High School years ago. It's a beautiful school, but it's over 55 years old. It is showing its age inside. It needs some improvements. And although the portable classrooms are gone, the safety concern with Coon Rapids High School is you get into the front of the building and you can literally walk 400,000 square feet of building before you get to the auditorium or field house if you're there for weekend events or evening events. What we would like to do is move the front entry, and on the slide, the upper left depiction shows a new front entryway by the auditorium, moving it a little bit to the south, and in doing so, and then at the bottom left slide shows the field house entrance. And in between is a long hallway that allows us to section off the building and secure the academic wing from the field house and auditorium and provide security. And it provides a great place for parents and grandparents and students if they're there for concerts or events. We'll put some soft furniture in there, and it's really going to enhance the inside of that school. In addition to that, we'll add some classrooms. We'll continue to upgrade our science media areas. We've added some focus areas. I think you may be aware of the biomedical program at Coon Rapids High School. We're also adding a Center for Engineering, Math, and Science program. And they're very popular programs. So there's some really nice things going on at Coon Rapids High School, but we really would like to improve that building and make it a showplace again for our community. River Trails, I mentioned L.O. Jacob is full, and it's being used for emotional behavior disorder, EBD students, autistic students, and developmentally cognitive disability students. And they require more space than your average classroom. So the additional spaces there will support the specialized services and what the staff are doing with those kids. And I've just got a real rough drawing. We're thinking about bumping out the back of the building. If you look at L.O. Jacob from Coon Rapids Boulevard, you'd maybe see the new gym space and classroom addition, but we're working with staff and how we can segregate different populations of students in that building. But it's working very well for that purpose. And all of this, and I think I've mentioned it to Mr. Mayor and the council members in the past, that all of this has the potential, if Coon Rapids starts to grow the way Blaine and Ramsey is, these schools can convert back into elementary schools at any time. And if that happened, rather than moving these special needs students out back into storefronts and lease space, we would like to repurpose some other buildings if another area of the district, for example, Anoka or Champlin, had additional space, move students there. So we have flexibility with these plans. So maintaining quality schools, this is really true in Coon Rapids as well as Anoka, because our buildings in Coon Rapids average 50 years. And the Cub Scouts that were just here are probably in Hamilton or Hoover or Sand Creek and Mississippi, and these schools need improvements. And we really need the bond money to go in and change our libraries that were built in the 50s and early 60s into media centers with plug-ins for laptops and Chromebooks that the kids are using today. Also improve special education programs. So the operating referendum, the building bond is contingent on the operating referendum passing. We can't build the space. The one thing we don't want to do, and our public doesn't want us to do, is build buildings and not be able to open them. So the operating funds would be used to staff the new spaces for principals, custodians, cooks, and our utilities, and then a portion of those operating funds, about $4 million of that $9.5 million operating levy, would be used for addressing class size and trying to cut class sizes where they're exceeding our range. So what does all this cost? The tax impact on a $200,000 home, the operating levy is $828. The construction bond is $541. And that would be almost $14, but we're offsetting that with a reduction of almost $3 in our tax levy, specifically our maintenance budget, because some of these projects will take the place of projects on HVAC, lighting, ceilings that we would have done. So we'll reduce that budget and cut $2.67. The impact on a $200,000 home is about $11 a month. To put that in perspective, our last building bond question in '99 for those new schools, the average priced home in the school district was $125,000 in 1999. And that impact at that time was $15 a month. So we've surveyed our residents and our parents and said, what do you think is a reasonable ask? If we can demonstrate to you that there is a need for construction to get rid of the portable classrooms, we still have 62 portable classrooms in the district with 14,000 students every day, every period, walking outside of our buildings to go to these classrooms. And that the task force said that just isn't acceptable. We can do better than that. So at that time, the impact we think is reasonable. Parents and residents told us between $10 and $15 a month. If we can demonstrate the need, they would support that. So the board tried to keep at the low end of that. Voting information, you can vote today. The election is actually 3 weeks from tonight. But it is possible to vote early, and there's been a change in voting practices for that. So you can vote any time at the Anoka County Courthouse, or you can just call in and ask for an application to do that. So election day is Tuesday, November 7th. And if you would like more details, there's several more concept plans on what we're looking at doing with these schools and building a new school in Blaine, where we have, if you've driven toward Lino Lakes on 242 in Lexington, you've seen the growth that's happening there. We'd like to build a school there. Same thing in Ramsey. If you drive up 10 toward North Fork Golf Course, toward Elk River, you'll see the development going on. So that it includes 2 new elementary schools in those areas and improvements in all of our older schools and bringing them up to date. And all of that detail is on our website, Fit for the Future at ahschools.us. So with that, I will stand for any questions or comments.
Seemed pretty thorough. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Holden while he's here? Well, Nice job, Chief Wise. That's a nice video. So your concern that you mentioned, that question about, well, didn't you close these schools? Part of the discussion this evening with the Scouts, one of the parents said, we know this isn't you, but we want to ask about the school bond referendum. Didn't you close a bunch of schools? You can't just put the kids back in there? So I did pretty well. I had heard it enough times that I covered it kind of the same way you did. But that is a concern out there. So it is really a matter of getting the education out there.
And if those schools, Mr. Mayor, if those schools were boarded up and empty, moving students from Northeast Blaine or Northwestern Ramsey to the Coon Rapids schools would be a long, expensive transportation proposition, but the schools are full. They're being well used. So thank you for that.
All right. Well, no questions. I guess thank you very much, Judge.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda is to approve the minutes of the October 3rd meeting.
Mayor?
Councilmember Grzykowiak.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the October 3rd council meeting.
Second. Motion by Grzykowiak, second by Kicker. Any discussion or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And that motion carries. I think we might have one abstention. No, everybody was here? Okay. All right. Excellent. Next item on the agenda is to approve we have one item on our consent agenda this evening. Almost hard to put a consent agenda together for one item, but to approve the final payment for project 16-2 street reconstruction. And let's see, the changes for project 16-2 were for a storm sewer addition and a PVC pipe with greater wall thickness. The actual project costs were less than the final contract amount due to less work performed than the actual bid. So we are looking at, let's see, there's no liquidated damages, so that we're looking at approving final payment to Forest Lake Contracting in the amount of $42,251.73 for project 16-2 street reconstruction. And that's the end of our consent agenda.
You're on.
Councilmember Kicker.
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Kicker, second by Geisler. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And that motion carries. Item 4 on this evening's agenda will include a public hearing, and it's for consideration of ordinance Springbrook Drainage District dissolution. And yeah. Mr. Stemwell, anything you want to cover before we open the public hearing, or Ms. Legg?
Maybe all I can say is we created this district a long time ago. It was created in 1986, but was not actually used until 1994. And the taxes, there was like a special tax levy on the parcels in that district that helped pay for storm drainage improvements within that district. There are a couple other things that also contributed to that, assessments and some tax increment. But once those bonds were issued and paid off in 2010, there's no need for that district anymore, and it just kind of creates an issue when properties that are straddling the boundaries of that district and outside of that district want to combine, for example, then they can't do it because one's in one taxing district and one's in a different taxing district. So since we haven't used it, we're just recommending that we get rid of it.
And you said the bonds were satisfied in 2010, is that?
Correct.
So there's no revenue there, there's nothing sitting in an account that, okay.
No, back at that time, what was a residual left from those bonds was closed into the storm drainage district, or a storm drainage fund. It's one of our enterprise funds. So there was some residual back then that was closed for that similar sort of purpose.
Okay. Anybody have any questions before we open up the public hearing? All right, hearing none then. In the matter of the consideration of ordinance Springbrook Drainage District dissolution, I will open up the public hearing.
Council, Mayor, I own the building at 8501 Evergreen, which is suffering.
And you are, sir?
My name is Phil Rosar. I forgot to tell you that. Wonderful mayor. Phil Rosar, 10640 Mississippi Boulevard. I own the property at the end of 8501 Evergreen Boulevard, which is in the Springbrook Nature drainage ditch. It's actually crossed by several different ditches. And there's a water intrusion problem down there caused by massive development that's happened over the last couple of years. We're in the process of resolving some of these issues. What's happening is with the Magnum Trucking building, which was built, we started having water bubbling up at our building. Then, if you'll look at that packet, you will see this massive building that's been built on the Magnum Trucking site. Our water intrusion got even worse. We're trying to address this problem. I don't know if this is going to have to be done through some type of a bond, but the pond on the middle of the paper that there's taped together, there's a map showing the 8501 Evergreen building. Then there's a vacant lot which I own and can't develop now because the pond is on the other side of it. And the Magnum Trucking property, which is a vacant lot on that picture, they've just built a massive building down there. All of that water is going into the pond, and the pond is draining on my property. So we're going to have to resolve the issue, and I'm not sure if that's going to require some type of bond. That's why I don't want to see this particular issue closed yet, because we have a residual problem caused by, in my opinion, not taking into consideration what was going to happen with the rest of the property when the original engineering was done, because it's insufficient. And we've been working on it. You can see by the letters that I've had Coon Creek out there. I've had the city out there. And Coon Creek has said that there's several different options that they're coming up with, one of which is to dig the pond out, make it deeper, reline it. Second is to stop the water intrusion from coming there. A lot of them are just include my property, which should be, they want me to put in drains and so on. But the fact of the matter is the water's coming from upstream, and I believe that this should be something that everybody in that area should pay for, since everybody in the area uses it. And I should be the last one to pay because I'm the one being damaged. So I would ask that you table this until this water issue problem is resolved. It hurts the city virtually nothing. It does hurt combining the properties. I agree with her. But it really doesn't hurt the city for any reason. I have to address this problem, and it's weakening the foundation of my building. And I can't build on the lot next door until this water issue is resolved. Didn't.
I guess I'd like a response from staff, because there's a lot of information to get at the last minute.
I'll just point out one thing. This is our first reading of this ordinance, but then I think Tim can probably address the
Not the first reading. It came up about a month.
Well, this evening would be the introduction.
Introduction.
So we wouldn't actually be taking an action other than introducing it tonight, but.
Correct.
Yeah.
I would further ask the council to instruct staff to get somebody else working on this. It's not something I should have to pay for on my own, because the problem isn't caused by me. It's caused by the people upstream. If I could.
Sorry, it always is, isn't it?
Well, you know, I understand that they want to put as much building on a piece of property, because I'm the same way. But it's impacting the neighbors, and that's where the line has to be drawn. And it's really not even their fault. In my opinion, it was engineered improperly, and therefore we might have to go back in and do some bonding, and this cost be dispersed by everybody, not by just me.
Is there a map somewhere to show what this Coon Creek district actually is, and does it include the properties that would impact that?
I have a paper map that I can run up here. It's just in black and white, but it does show the area. We can do it that way.
The area you're showing us is the bond in the taxing district?
Correct. Let's see if we can get something to shine on this.
All of this area is in the watershed district. Coon Creek
Let's see. Can we get focused on this?
Yeah, you've got it.
But yeah, it doesn't show it really good. Let's see here. Maybe I'll put it up here. I don't know if that'll help. Right here, maybe out a little bit. It's just a little bit too big. Okay, so it's that south side down by where Target is, and that, you know, that Evergreen Business District.
So it's all of the shaded area?
Correct. That's correct. So I will point out there are other financing options too. I'm not saying that they're the only option, but we could assess it. Back at this time, it was such a massive project that we needed all sorts of different kinds of revenue streams to make it happen.
And Mr. Roser, your property is the one at Evergreen and 85th?
So here's
Councilmember Johnson, if I can put this under, if we can.
I think you have to put it in the same spot up there, right over the queue.
Yeah, right over at QWERTY.
My building is right here, where my finger is, on 8501 Evergreen. I own the vacant property to the north, and where this next vacant property is right here is where that massive building being built is, and then Magnum Trucking is right here. And when we first built here, none of this.
Okay, Magnum Trucking, you said, was right here, I think.
Yeah, none of these buildings were here. We had no water problem. Magnum came in, we started having a little bit of trouble. Then once this building came in, and there's hardly any green space, it's all building and all parking lot. All of that water is going into the creek, or correction, pond, which is right here. And when this was originally done, they already said that there was a water issue. When this was done in the first place, they knew there was a water issue, but they did nothing to address it. So Magnum comes along, buys the property, and I don't blame them. They bought the property thinking that they could build the building. They built the building, and my building, the foundation, I've put in the loading docks a couple of times, spent thousands of dollars on it, and it just keeps getting worse. It has to be addressed at the pond level. So I don't know what financing options we're going to come up with, but in my opinion, this really doesn't hurt the city to just put this on hold until we can come up with a workable plan and go from there, because everyone should share in this, because they're all using it. They couldn't build their building if they didn't have the pond, and if the pond held the water the way it's supposed to, I wouldn't have the problems I have right now. Sorry about that, I'm dry. Should have brought the water up. So that's the only reason that I'm asking, just to withhold it for a while until we can come up with a workable plan. Unfortunately, this last summer, I had 44 houses hit from the storm, so haven't had a lot of time to work on this.
So is it possible that if they determine that this area is impacting that building, can you like restart to collect the tax in the, or I'm just kind of curious, or do you have to start over again?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it came up when we first introduced this that if this goes away, any future improvement in this area, you're going to have to look at what the impacted area is. So it may not be the same for this go-around as it was with the original one when this was first initiated. So yes, you can establish a new district the same way this one was done. But I will also add a few comments on this, and I know Mark has met with Mr. Rosar last year, potentially 2 years ago. Reading the memo, the property owner during the meeting on the 17th noticed this was occurring 15 years ago. This would predate anything from Magnum.
That's incorrect.
They lowered the pond elevations in here 2 feet, so the high waters on these ponds are actually lower than they were prior to Magnum coming on board. Again, this is, I won't say that this is all coming from that ditch, but I will say it's very similar to issues we have throughout the city with some elevated groundwater that comes about. And I don't have an elevation for his building, but everything in this, and from my understanding of the meetings with Mark, is we're talking about surficial groundwater and not pond water flow necessarily. We're not, the pond water is not oozing out onto adjacent properties. That's continuously flowing down and through Springbrook into the Mississippi. What we have is what we install drain tile, what we hear localized flooding on some of the other properties. And there were some attempts by him or previous managers in the past to add catch basins and other things to collect this. And Mark provided him at that time back in 2016 with some options to address some curb issues, maybe do some regrading of the parking, add some drain tile installation. But absent getting additional information on the elevation of his building and the elevation of the ponds and other things, I think we're dealing mostly with groundwater flow and not necessarily the ditch or this drainage system that flows through there. Magnum had elevated groundwater when they put what they put in. They had to do drain tile and other items. They not only added to the size of the existing basin that was there, but added water quality, rain gardens, and other things as part of that. We had that big rainstorm last year that blew out Evergreen and caused a couple $100,000 worth of damage down in there. So yes, it is a considerable drainage way. I would be very surprised if a pond several thousand feet away is causing discharge, because we're not talking about surface water flow where the pond gets to a certain elevation and then that water flows onto his property. We're talking about water bubbling up from underneath. So it's difficult for me to understand how standing water in a pond over there doesn't run over land, but it's causing water to bubble up somewhere else. It's part of a groundwater issue that exists not only here but in other areas of the city. But again, we can continue to work with Mr. Rosar on potential solutions, or whether that means a new district needs to be initiated. I'll talk to Mr. Rosar personally, but I do know he's met with our staff and the watershed on a few occasions, and just going through this memo briefly.
It's not my, I don't want to negotiate this or fight with staff about this. I was simply trying to slow this up because I think it will become a financing arm. I don't want to go into litigation. I just want to fix the problem. And I didn't have the problem. As far as 15 years ago, I didn't even own the building 15 years ago. So that's a misnomer. I've only owned the building for 10 years. And during that time, when I first bought the building, I had no water problems. Once the pond was installed, I started getting water problems. And the water is going into the pond and percolating through the soil and coming up at where my loading docks are on all of my doors. And I've replaced that concrete a couple of times now. and it's quite expensive. But now it's actually attacking the foundation of the building.
Okay, hang on a second. So is there anybody, I realize this is creating a little bit of a title issue for folks down there. Is there anybody that's trying to work something out where if we drug our feet on this a little bit, where it would be harmed? I'm just curious, because it seems like this is just kind of a housekeeping thing to get something cleaned up. And if Mr. Rosar would like a little more time to have somebody look at something or work something out.
Part of the problem is I'm trying to hire a hydrologist. Nobody wants to work on it because they're afraid of the ramifications if they prove the city of Coon Rapids wrong. And that's what's really happening, because it would be very easy for me to have a lawsuit. And so the ones that work around here and work in the city keep telling me they don't want to do it because it's a conflict of interest for them, because they work so much within the city. Thank you. I'm sorry. So there is that problem. The second problem is I am going to hire an engineer. We are going to put dye in the pond to prove that it's coming up. I shouldn't have to do this. I didn't have the problem before that was developed. I shouldn't be put to this expense in this test. And if I am, and there's no doubt in my mind, I'm out there every day, what's going on. I see what's going on. If I am, well, then I probably should sue for getting my money back, at least. I'm not asking to fix my building. I'm not asking for any of that. I'm simply asking to stop the water from coming onto my property. That's not an unreasonable request.
Who just said, oh, Ms. Legg.
Oh, I should have said wonderful mayor, I'm sorry. This was all started because somebody was trying to combine some property. Now, it came from the engineering department to me. So I know somebody was trying to combine some property, but I don't think it's critical timing. We do have another couple of weeks here too to do a little bit more work, I suppose, whatever we can get done in a couple of weeks. But I didn't get the impression that time was of the essence. So,
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Councilmember Johnson.
If we do the introduction, does that require us to put it on the very next council meeting agenda? So staff could have an opportunity to take a look at it and could determine what the appropriate next council meeting would be if staff wants to move forward with the ordinance.
Mayor, Council, yes, that's accurate. I mean, we could choose not to put it on the next council meeting. It could be, I think we'd want to do it relatively soon, even if that was to bring it back. We recommend that it be tabled to a future date. You know, I don't think we'd want to have it linger out too long once it's been introduced, but I don't think waiting an extra meeting would be problematic.
I would just follow up on my little comment and say I don't have any problem with introducing it, but I would like staff to take a look at it and even consider, given that there's been more development down the road on Evergreen, as to whether or not if there are stormwater issues, and I seem to remember when I was on the Coon Creek Watershed District touring this exact area and looking at some of these stormwater ponds as being a potential issue going forward, as to whether or not we ought to consider a larger kind of area that is all benefiting from having these stormwater ponds, and whether we would be looking at some improvements down the road and how to finance them. So,
that's what we guys like.
For me, I have no problem introducing this and taking a look, where I think we would absolutely commit to looking at this and doing something, but I don't think that this tax district is the end-all be-all. We may want to look at fixing it, and we may need a different tax, so
be a larger one.
It could be a larger one to be able to solve the problem. So I think the commitment would be that we look at it. I think introducing this, and then making a determination, is it right to sunset this one and look at a new one? But, I mean, I think we'll look at the issue, absolutely.
That's all more I can ask.
Yeah. So.
All right. So is it the wishes of the council to, well, I guess we'll keep the public hearing first. All right, is anybody else here to address the public hearing?
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Roser. On the ordinance for the Springbrook Drainage District dissolution, hearing seeing no one else, I'll close the public hearing on that. And then, yeah, all right, so then.
But do we want to do a date for when it would come back?
Yeah, Mr. Samuel?
Mayor, Council, I guess my feeling is we wouldn't need a specific direction from council on a date. I guess my feeling is we'll talk at a staff level, and that it likely wouldn't be on the first meeting in November, perhaps the second meeting, just to provide some additional time. I wouldn't want it to go too much further than that, though. Sure. So it's not lingering out there, but certainly we'll talk with engineering, Coon Creek watershed and folks. What I was going to offer, which has already been said, but I'll reiterate that, in order to create a special taxing district, it takes the exact same process as we're using to dissolve it. And so my guess is that whenever issues occurring, if in fact the solution is creating a new district, it is pretty simple to do that and probably would be required given that the boundaries would change. Somewhat, I'm guessing, it would be different than this one that was created in 1986. That's just my layman approach. I don't know if the engineer agrees.
Okay. All right, so with that, then we will consider this introduced, but we will not be looking for it at the next council meeting. So a little time to figure things out, Mr. Roser. Thank you. All right. Item 5, come on, there we go. Item 5 is to consider resolutions 18-4 sub 9, awarding contract for bunker renovation at Bunker Hills Golf Club, and resolution 17-108, amending the 2017 golf budget. Mr. Himmer, are you going to tell us about this, or are you going to have Mr. Anderson?
Mayor, Council, thank you. First, I'd like to note that I have Brad Habel with me tonight. For those that don't know him, Brad Habel is the Green Superintendent in his 21st year with those duties at Bunker Hills, with more than 30 years of service at the club. We're both here today because we see this, if we're allowed to move forward, as a very significant step for Bunker Hills. So at the meeting on September 19th, you approved plans and specifications and authorized us to go out for bid for this renovation project, and bids have been opened. Just as a reminder, this project would encompass the original front 9 at Bunker Hills, which is essentially and approximately 33 bunkers. Some of these would become obsolete and no longer there, but all would be minimized for multiple reasons. One is to get rid of the liner, that it causes a bit of a safety issue, also a maintenance issue. These bunkers have gotten far too large and the edges have deteriorated. It cleans up all of that. It makes it much less expensive to maintain over time. And a very important part of this, it makes the golf course easier and much more enjoyable and faster to play, which is great for everybody involved, from operations to the end user. I'd also like to note that 9 total holes have already been completed using the same sustainable method to rave reviews. So that gives us even more confidence that this would be a sustainable and quality solution for us. We did receive, at the bid opening on October 11th, 3 bids. There were 2 qualified bidders, and the lowest responsible bidder was Hartman Companies at $305,000. This is more than we anticipated this project to cost. There are several reasons for this. One main reason is this is essentially 33 mini projects within one project, and those construction limits for each mini project go out a ways and require a lot of sod. There may be substantial opportunity to save money by seeding instead of sodding, to combining bunkers when we can, but we can't quantify those savings at this time until we have that conversation with the selected contractor. So our hope is that you adopt resolution both to amend the budget, because we also have the opportunity to start this project early, which is a huge opportunity. If we can do this and get a few weeks in November, that'd be a great thing. It get us in advance on this, and help not have to move golfers around too much in the springtime and get this buttoned up faster. And we'd also ask that you would award the contract for the bunker renovation at this time.
Excellent. Yeah, you have no idea what the weather's going to do. I mean, it was 70 degrees today.
Yeah.
All right, Council, any questions for Mr. Anderson, or?
Mayor?
Councilmember Kraskowiak.
Some questions for Tim there. At our September 19th meeting, when we considered adopting this resolution and these plans, the estimate was considerably lower, like you mentioned, $228,000. I guess I would just like to know, because in that meeting, we were told that you'd done 9 holes previously, rave reviews, you just mentioned that, and now we're doing 9 more. How could we be 40% off in our estimate?
It's a great question, Councilmember Kraskowiak. The primary reason for that is the sizing of the bunkers. The bunkers that have been renovated so far were much smaller than the ones that we're renovating now, requiring far less sod. It's a special sod, drought-tolerant fescue sod, that does very well under these conditions and in this implementation. So it primarily is the sod. That's why seeding in certain areas, in big areas, instead of sodding, may produce a significant savings we just can't quantify right now. But that is the primary driver for why it was higher. The sand cost certainly has something to do with that. The sand is expensive, more expensive than it was previously, and in previous projects. And the quantity obviously is much higher.
Okay.
Councilmember Kraskowiak, just a quick question. Am I missing something? Because it said on here that the estimated and budgeted costs for the overall bunker rehabilitation project was $323,000. So that wasn't the estimate in September 19th?
Mayor, Council, the estimate for the entire project, which was in the 2018 budget, was $323,000. But the sand alone is estimated to cost between $90,000 and $95,000. Okay. So the 305 added with the 90
yep.
is the total cost before we really look into those savings and try to get as much back of that as we can.
All right. Very good.
And then I have a follow-up question. I don't know if now is the right time, but regarding the award of to the bidder. Go ahead. Can I ask on that?
Sure.
So Veet and Company came in with the lowest bid, considerably lower than the other two, but they were disqualified. And I'd like to know why they were disqualified. I mean, I know that they've been in business for like 100 years, and they do a lot of earthwork.
Sure.
So if you could just explain that for us, Mr. Himmer, maybe.
Councilmember Kraskowiak, members of the council. Their bid, within the project specifications, they were required to have a certain number of golf course projects or similar work, and they didn't meet those qualifications. They've done some rough grading, basically wholesale grading, but not small type work. So they acknowledged they didn't meet the intent of that. They interpreted it to include baseball, soccer fields, things of that nature, which are inaccurate, as well as the type of sod they were proposing wouldn't have met the specs. And in the end, they were, I will say, thankful that we didn't accept their bid. They were concerned about us pulling their bid bond and trying to do the work because they couldn't perform the work at that price, and they didn't realize it until the bids were opened and they were 1/3 the cost of everybody else.
Okay. I had a feeling it had something to do with machines on the golf course and everything like that, so, okay.
So, Councilmember Johnson?
I just want to see if I understand this right. We're going to spend over $300,000 to make the game of golf easier for people.
And
faster. And faster. I mean, I kind of get the economics of that. I'm not sure that they will balance out. Everybody that I know that comes from outside of Coon Rapids, and I work downtown Minneapolis, that plays at Bunker, raves about how beautiful it is. And so my compliments to both of you gentlemen for the ongoing work that you've done to make it a really wonderful destination for people to play golf. Do you all feel that this is necessary to stay competitive in your market? And Brad, I would ask you, is it necessary for you to have these improvements to kind of keep a state-of-the-art facility going?
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Johnson. Yeah, and the other component to that too is, you know, Mr. Anderson mentioned the black liner that we have in those bunkers.
Yep.
And there's just no good way for us to go in there, maybe on a Monday, and fix it, and then be done with 2 months. And we have been having some issues with people hitting that black liner with clubs. Thank God we haven't had any, you know, real serious injuries or anything like that. But when we did those liners back in '05, that was kind of the way to go. But we're just finding out that as we put that liner in basically for a contamination issue, but we found out that everything that blows in is still contaminating the bunker. So part of the big component is to remove the liner for a safety issue too. And I do think it's important to stay competitive in our market like this. It's crazy to think that bunkers are the #1 renovated thing now, but that's the way it is. It's not greens, tees, or fairways. It's bunkers, and it's probably because of the PGA Tour, but.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's not greens, tees, or fairways. That just rolls off his tongue. All right. Council, what are your wishes?
Your Honor.
Councilmember Wells.
I'll move adopting resolution number 17-108, amending the 2017 budget for Golf Club Bunker Project, and adopting resolution number 18-4 sub 9, awarding contract to Hartman Companies Incorporated in the amount of $305,000 for the original front 9 bunker renovation project at Bunker Hills Golf Club.
And with Brad's explanation, I'll second that.
Motion by Wells, second by Johnson. Discussion?
Mayor?
Councilmember Griscoviac?
Amending the 2018 budget, it's already in the 2018 budget for at least this much. Is it amended because we can start the project earlier? Is that the reason?
Amending the 2017 budget.
17, correct. Yeah.
Yes, Mayor and Councilmember. It's because it's not in the 17 budget, so we will start paying bills this year, so we'll bring those monies back into 17.
Thanks for the clarification.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And that motion carries. Thank you. So Mr. Habel, were those just golf carts that were out in the mud a week ago Saturday that carved all those ruts out there in that front 9?
Unfortunately not. Those are some Sandhill cranes doing some of those damage down there, and there are some rodents out there too, some skunks and some raccoons doing it too, so.
Oh my, that's a lot. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda is item 6.
We're going to have to get another management program meeting together.
What kind of management? Oh yeah, that kind of management.
Yeah, that kind
All right. Item 6 on our agenda is to consider adoption of ordinances 2195, 2196, and 2197, repealing recent revisions to City Codes 8-202, 8-215 sub 2, and 12-915 sub 5. The ordinances before the City Council were introduced at the October 3rd meeting and further discussed at the October 10th, 2017 work session. These ordinances would repeal the recent revisions to City Codes 8-202, 8-215 sub 2, and 12-914 sub 5. So this was introduced on October 3rd. That would repeal recently adopted modifications to the recycling codes pertaining to one-to-one multi-unit waste and recycling. This topic was discussed at the October 10th, 2017 City Council work session, and staff provided council with an update on the implementation of the recycling ordinance changes. Furthermore, council heard feedback from several property managers and owners of multi-unit properties during the work session. And if this moves forward, it's with the understanding we'll still have an inconsistency in chapters 8 and 12 as far as what the required recycling pickup is, and we can do that at another time, I would imagine. Okay. All right. Council?
Mayor?
Councilmember Griscoviac?
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinances 2195, 2196, 2197, repealing recent changes to city codes 8-202, 8-215 sub 2, and 12-915 sub 5.
Second.
Motion by Griscoviac, second by Johnson. Discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Geisler?
I'm disappointed. I think that the repealing the recent changes is not the right thing to do. I think modifying is the right thing to do. I think we could have delayed the implementation for a year or so to give time to work. I think what we heard at the work session last week was a small percentage of people who were vocal and didn't like things. We heard a resident who was thrilled. We heard about when this was put into our city newsletter, single-family homes residents that were going, hey, can we have this? It's directionally correct. It's the right thing to work towards. Was it perfect? No. Do we need to tweak it? Yes. I think the knee-jerk reaction to repeal is a knee-jerk reaction. So I would hope that when staff brings back the discrepancy between these two chapters, that we have the opportunity to look at this a little closer and fine-tune some tweaks or start moving a little closer to the intent of what was in these changes, because it's the right thing to do. Was it perfect? No, but let's not just throw the baby out with the bathwater, and let's make a diligent effort to move forward.
Okay. I thought it was interesting that the one resident that was celebrating it, their building wasn't close to being conforming either to the ordinance. But
And that's why she was excited about it, because it was going to get to conform.
all right. Any other discussion?
Your Honor.
Councilmember Wells?
I'm not quite as adamant as Councilman Geisler. I do think we have to relook at this. I didn't think we had enough time. That's why I'm voting for the repeal. But I do think it was in the right direction. It just, we need to think it through a little bit more. But I don't think this should go away totally.
Okay. Your Honor. Councilmember Kicker?
I'd like to say something similar to that. I know Councilmember Demmer had talked in the work session about making sure that discussions continue, and I think that that's important. It certainly seemed like the multi-unit management was willing to do that, and I think that that's important. And again, if by repealing this language, that those communications stop, that would be a bad thing, because I think it is a good thing to move towards. I know that the ordinance wording gave it a little bit of, gave it some teeth, but I think that we need to continue to work through some of the issues to make sure that both sides, or all sides actually, are in agreement with this. So at this point, I feel like I'm going to do the same thing, vote for the repeal. Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councilmember Johnson?
I would just say very briefly that, and I'm speaking now to residents of multifamily housing and to property managers of multifamily housing, that if you want to avoid the city coming in with an ordinance down the road, the best thing to do is to work with Colleen and the city to implement a voluntary program for recycling that is really state-of-the-art. So I'm going to vote for repeal on this one to give them that opportunity. That's all I'll say on that.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Geisler?
I have one other thing. So if you are a single-family resident, though, and we're excited about more seeing people in the city getting weekly pickup, while we don't have weekly recycling, you can ask your garbage hauler for more recycling bins. So you can have 2 recycling bins. So fill up one in week 1 and fill up the second one in week 2. So make sure that you have those options, and that call your garbage hauler if you want more space for your recycling, because we'd love to see people do that more.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Mayor,
Councilmember Griscovia?
I'd just like to say I do appreciate the efforts that Coon Rapids does in recycling. I know we're a national leader, not just a leader here in the state. And the fact that our current code does have some discrepancies in it that is going to need to be addressed, I would like to see when we address those discrepancies that we do adequately make an effort to encourage recycling and to make sure that our multifamily unit managers are all providing adequate resources to make sure that all of their residents can recycle to their maximum ability.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed?
Aye.
The motion carries. We have so few, so one opposed, Councilmember Geisler. We have so many unanimous things, I almost fell out of my talking points. All right. We are on item number 7, to consider resolution number 17-27 sub 8, accepting plans and specifications for the Hanson Water Tower rehabilitation and authorizing solicitation of bids. Mr. Hammer.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, due to some premature deterioration on the coating of the Hanson Tower, it's primarily on the roof that you cannot see, as well as some of the along the fluted columns. We are looking to do a rehab project versus kind of a full recoat of this thing, which would be in the neighborhood of $1 million plus. So what we're intending to do is abrasive wash the outside. The good news is the primer coating is still in good shape, so we're not talking about rusting and impacts to the underlying structure. So we're going to wash it down, loosen up all the loose paint on there, apply new coats. We think this can gain us about another 10, 12 years of life on this. And so with that, we prepared some plans and specifications. There were dollars budgeted for 2017, which now, due to the time of the year, we want to get this contract in place, and so it'll be the first thing done in the spring. So we'll probably be looking to move those dollars forward to next year, and we'd like authorization to take this out for bid.
Mr. Hammer, you mentioned that this plan should get us another 10 to 12 years. If you did a full refurbish at that $1 million plus point, what's the life expectancy of that?
You're probably talking 25 to 30 years.
And do you have any kind of an estimate on what you think this will run to buy us 10 or 12 years?
Well, without giving away information
all right, never mind.
Prospective
right,
bidders,
we can wait.
it's in our capital improvement program. It's in the water fund. Anybody can look it up. I mean, we're on the magnitude of 300,000 plus or minus.
Okay. Yeah. All right. That seems to make sense for math.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember
I
Geisler.
make a motion to adopt resolution 17-27 sub 8, accepting plans and specifications for the Hanson Water Tower rehabilitation and authorize the solicitation of bids.
Second.
Motion by Geisler, second by Kicker. Any discussion? Here, Councilmember Griscoviac.
I just wanted to point out and maybe ask Mr. Himmer that the water tower, a huge piece of our infrastructure in the city, a very important piece of infrastructure that needs to be maintained, of course, it's our newest piece of big water infrastructure, built in 2003, went into effect 2003.
Yeah, it's about 15 years.
15 years old. You just mentioned that a coating should last 25 to 30 years. Have we identified why this coating failed after just 15? And is that manufacturer or that company that did that coating stepping up in any way with warranty?
Yeah. Councilmember Griscoviac, the warranty periods have expired. It's typically a 2-year warranty on the coating, so those are gone. There's some, you can go back and look at the temperature logs and were things cleaned properly. The stuff on the roof that nobody can really see, we've got a lot of private telecom providers that are up there frequently adding antennas and doing maintenance work. Is it from the traffic related to that, oils and greases, things of that nature? There's so many factors to find out what that could be. And all I know is I just look to find good inspectors and workers that make sure that this doesn't repeat itself.
And then a follow-up question. You'd mentioned the top for sure, and then some other. I live up in that area, and I can kind of see some of the yellow primer, whatever it is, behind that blue on some of the columns.
Yep.
Right? So that's all going to be taken care of. So this thing's going to look like brand new again. It's not going to be patched up.
No, we're gonna spray it all down and knock off the loose stuff. You're gonna have to blend it in. So is it going to be perfectly brand new? No, but you're not gonna go up there and dab a little paint here and paint there. It's gonna be washed down. There's multiple coatings that have to be initiated. If we find issues related to the steel, we'll have to address those as need be. But it's supposed to blend as if you'd never even know it was a rehab job and it was just a full recoat.
Very good.
So Mr. Himmer, so how is that analyzed then to make sure that it wasn't bad primer or something in the first place that allowed the paint to release? Because we would just be putting more paint on that same primer then. I'm kind of thinking back to the old General Motors cars when the paint used to fall off the hood.
A lot of the work that goes into putting it up the first time is related to how you clean the steel in the very beginning. So while if it was a bad primer coat, you'd see the whole tower top to bottom. It'd probably be exhibited more on the tank because that has the moisture on a more consistent basis, but you're finding it not on the bottom side where the condensation forms, but kind of on the flute. So it could be just related to the way it was cleaned or the way it was applied or the temperatures at the times that these certain areas were done, because it's a tower of that size doesn't happen, in one sitting where you just paint the whole thing. So there are a lot of factors that go into that. But if it was a primer failure, you'd see the failure on the whole tank, I would assume. Now, I'm not an expert in priming tanks, and that's why I hired one to help.
Okay, well, as long as we got an expert out there, because I'd like to point out the General Motors cars, it came off the hood and the roof where the sun hit it. It wasn't the sides. So, all right. Very good. Did we already do that? Yeah, we already did that one, right? Oh, or no, we're in discussion, right? Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And that motion carries. I had already moved on to agenda item 8. I thought we were done. All right. Item 8 is to consider joint powers agreement with Anoka County for construction of the Hanson Boulevard BNSF Railroad Grade Separation City Project 16-13. Now, according to this, it's Tim Himmer, Public Works Director, but I'm almost thinking we should get this update from Chief Piper, shouldn't we? No. Yeah, Mr. Hammer.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is a standard joint powers agreement we've executed with Anoka County on several occasions. This is to add the 4-lane divided roadway over the railroad tracks on Hanson Boulevard. It's well, you can see by the project number in 2016 that it's been going on for some time. There have been numerous open houses related to this. Project costs are still consistent with what the original estimates. It puts the city's contribution at 5% or approximately $1.2 million. I think probably the biggest issue on here that hadn't been discussed previously is the 2-year construction schedule. And that is in fact due to several issues. Number one being the private utilities that have significant improvements through this corridor. And until we can do the frontage roads and ancillary grading along the edges, there are no places that they can put them. They could trench them in now, and then we build retaining walls and fill, and now they're going to be 12 to 15 feet deep, and you wouldn't be able to get to them to maintain them. So due to this corridor, the 80 trains a day that run through there, the fact that you have to complete the bridges before you can fill the middle to allow that traffic to continue to go. And in light of recent projects that have been done in winter issues, I'm really not looking to try to cross our fingers and hope we get good weather. I'd rather plan for 2 years, allow this construction to take place, have it open through the winter time, try to minimize disruptions to schools and emergency vehicles. And so while not excited about a 2-year project, I really wouldn't want to risk the fact that we end up with a 2-year project and we're not planning for it. So with that, I would be more than happy to go with the recommendation and the discussions with the county on this 2-year project. And with that, I will stand for any questions you might have.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Johnson.
why can't this be done in 1 year? I mean, is the county telling us that this is going to go into a 2-year period, or are we just saying, hey, we had a bad experience with Foley and some other projects, and therefore we're trying to control people's expectations about that, and then writing into our own joint powers agreement a 2-year timeline so that we control the expectations of the public? One of the things I've been frustrated about, because I represent the ward that includes all of Foley, is that we get assurances from the county that things are going to be done by a certain date, and then they don't get done, and then the people are very upset about that, and they look first to the city, because this county road runs right through the city. I am fully supportive of this project. I am going to vote for a joint powers agreement in this case. But what I want to do is make sure that the county is fully in on this stuff. And one of the frustrating things that I've seen in Foley is that where our city workers on all the feeder streets that run into Foley are working overtime, and they're putting in the hours, and they're getting the projects done when we say they're going to get done, the county workers are going home. They're not working any overtime. The county's not budgeting for that. And that's a problem, because we have short construction seasons here in Minnesota. And I would prefer that we hold the county's feet to the fire, if you will, by putting in a liquidated damages clause. They should tell us when they're going to finish a project, and if they don't finish it, then perhaps they take another percentage and what they pay for in the project. I think we should be more vigorous in negotiating these joint powers agreements with the county so that we can get a good construction schedule for our residents and lessen the impact of construction on our residents. But if the county is telling you that it was going to take 2 years anyway, no matter what resources they were going to put into it, then I can accept that, and then I can help communicate that issue to the community. So what's going on?
Councilmember Johnson, members of the council, a lot of the issue is related to things outside of our control. With the fiber running down that roadway and the main telecommunication piece in that can't physically be relocated till portions of the project are complete. Whereas on most jobs, you clear the edges, you move them out of the way, and you go. With the grade and the retaining walls, and not to mention our existing sanitary and water main underneath here and trying to get under the railroad tracks, that is a task. So a lot of it is related to factors that cannot be controlled. They just have to occur as part of the project.
May I, as just a point of clarification on what you just said, are you saying the road work and the accesses for people to get onto the road can be completed in a year, and it's all the other services that will take additional time?
Phase one would be doing all the utility work, all the public utility work, connecting frontage roads, building storm sewers and ponds, and allowing the private utilities to get out of the way. Okay. Phase two is, and it could be part of the winter work, is doing the bridge abutments and things spanning the railroad tracks. And if you recall, there are two bridges here, not one over the railroad tracks and one over 108th.
Right.
So those have to be built independently before you can start to fill in the middle. Right. And so you can build the abutments, you can build the other items, but in order to allow traffic to flow through, you have to delay that work. So phase one is all the utilities, all the connecting roadways, all the private utilities out of the way. Phase two is the bridges and getting up over the railroad tracks. And you can allow the winter for that to remain open before you start heading into that second phase.
How long do we think Foley is going to, or excuse me, I'm still thinking along those lines. That's a separate issue. How long do we think Hanson as a roadway, the bridge, if you will, the passage over the railroad tracks is going to be closed down?
The roadway would be closed from initially when the project commences around May, and probably until October, November timeframe. Then it would be open through the winter and probably again up until about that May, June timeframe. Then you're trying to get it complete and open again before school starts again in the fall. So it's a much shorter time frame, and in part 2 of the project, it would probably be more a May to September versus kind of a May through October, November.
I must insist that that we do not allow that that road surface to become a dirt road like it did in Foley, especially in Hanson. I don't want the people in that ward to have to go through what the people in my ward had to go through over a winter, if we're going to overwinter the project. And now I've kind of said my piece, so thank you.
It's funny how Foley was quite a learning curve.
Yes.
Councilmember Griscoviac?
To Councilmember Johnson's point, you can't, can you write that type of thing into a joint powers agreement? That they need to maintain that roadway in a drivable condition over the winter if it does take 2 years?
Yeah, we can add anything we like, Councilmember Griscoviac. I won't speak to liquidated damages. I don't know how that works in a joint powers agreement. Those are typical for a construction contract, so if the contractor doesn't meet those schedules, then the contractor pays those liquidated damages. I can't say that I've ever seen it in a joint powers agreement between 2 entities, though. But if you have some reservations or concerns about that 2 phase, we could modify the language, run that back to the county and say, here are the concerns. As I told them, this 2-year schedule is going to be probably the biggest issue we talk about, because what's been communicated all along, which means we'll probably have to go out and do another open house meeting and talk about why that's going to occur, and making sure that when this first started and the feasibility study was done, we looked at the cost of 1 season versus 2, and we would have expected the cost to be about $1 million more to make it last over 2 construction seasons. Now with their updated estimates and a different consultant on board doing the actual construction piece of it, they've provided some staging that shows the benefit of making it 2 construction seasons, which could allow for some work to occur in the winter and not put us at risk of potentially being caught in a situation where we're scrambling at the end of the year, you can't get concrete in, the asphalt plants are closing, and then we're kind of stuck and not prepared. So while I'm not excited about it, I think it's the best approach from what I've seen and been provided through those staging plans and such. But certainly we could add language that, you know, it will not be a minimum maintenance road. They would be responsible. I mean, they're responsible for it anyway. It's their jurisdiction. But the road needs to be in a finished condition, that, you know, you just lop off where the bridges go and you finish everything leading up to that, and it's in a new condition, and then you start in on what happens for the crossing. So if you have any recommended language, or I could take some liberties in going with that, I guess we need to make it part of what your approval is, though. So if you have some specific language, we should get that involved and then send that back to the county and see what their response to that would be, or whether they take it to the board and just approve it as is.
And I agree with Councilmember Johnson. I am far less concerned with the 2 years than I am with having a road like Foley again, because that was brutal. Councilmember Kicker?
Yeah, I was just going to say, after I read this, you know, it going 2 years and the road being closed in the summer of 2019, my understanding is that there's work going to be done on the north side of, on the north portion of Hanson, north of Highway 10, from Northdale Boulevard to Main Street that same summer. Is there concerns that we would have potentially Hanson closed from, you know, on the south end of town and on the north end of town?
That was also a concern of mine, that, and they're just getting into the design component of that as well for that piece, but that is supposed to be open through construction, similar to University, Foley, some of those other jobs. So it would not be a total closure going north, but there would be parking restrictions, or not parking, but travel restrictions, as well as Lions Coon Creek Park is also planned for 2019 as well. So there will be a lot occurring there during that time.
If it's on Hanson, it's happening. Yeah. All right.
So can we hold up the water tower and add that to the whole mix?
Oh, yeah, that too.
All right, so let's see, what are we looking at? We're looking at, so council, do we want to approve this joint powers agreement or what?
That's right. I think we obviously want the bridge. We want this to go forward. And the question becomes, can we add language that, whether it's in the maintenance section or indemnification, we won't hold anybody accountable if you keep the roadway at a quality level, or I'll look to Mr. Hemmer to say, is there a description or terminology from a public works perspective that would describe a drivable road that doesn't look like what Foley looked like last winter?
I would say we add another whereas. The city of Coon Rapids has concerns for a 2-year project, specifically the drivability of the roadway surface. So during the winter break, there should not be minimum maintenance standards. It should be a paved, passable road. You put me on the spot to come up with great language that an attorney will interpret for me, but I think it's a separate whereas. It must be paved through the winter and not a gravel surface.
So paved through the winter season.
Between stage 1 and 2.
Yeah, between stage 1 and 2, okay.
And we could put that in the same whereas potentially of where it talks about the project being 2018, 2019, and I don't have it in front of me, but
so at that point, I would make a motion to approve the execution of the joint power agreement with Anoka County for the construction and grade separation project on Hanson Boulevard at the BNSF railway crossing, with the addition of the language regarding the quality and drivability of the roadway during the winter season. Is that good enough? Yes. Okay.
Yes, all right. Second. We have a motion by Geisler and a second by Wells. Discussion? Councilmember Griscovian.
Verbiage like that added to the joint powers agreement, are we liable, or is the cost going to rise for us?
Well, right now, the costs are staying status quo from what they felt a 1-year project to a 2-year project is. We're subject to 5% of the total project cost is what's in this. And so if there's temporary asphalt to be put down, that is going to be part of a project cost, which we will be participating in.
Okay. So hopefully the asphalt would not be temporary, it'd be something else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and having spent some time chatting with the county engineer over the holidays while he was still pulling, well, he doesn't have any here, but he was still stressing about Foley and ordering the cold pack and trying to figure out ways around it. They don't want an experience like that again either. I mean, that's kind of like that Foley never again thing. So, all right, any other discussion? Councilmember Johnson?
Mr. Mayor, that I will vote for this. I do want to say to the council going forward, I think we need to take a little bit more control over the drafting of these joint powers agreements and setting into them what the city's expectations are for a completion date and certain things that are really going to impact our residents. And I do think that it is the kind of thing that we could and should insist upon, that if those targets aren't met, that then there's a consequence for that. Because the moment we sign off on one of these things, we surrender virtually all control as to how the project is going to go to the county, and we defer to them on these things, which is the nature of this. It's a county road, but it impacts our citizens in a big way. So I've said my piece, and I intend to vote for it.
Yeah. So that actually is a really good idea for us to come up with some minimum standards that, yeah, we're going to participate in the joint powers, but here's our minimum standards. We expect a road to be, if it's open in the winter, that it will be paved, or something. I mean, it seems like that would be a great conversation to to get some suggestions from the engineering department and folks in Ward 5. And
I don't want to just take the language that the county gives us and says, well, this is what we've done all the time. We have to be more proactive now, especially in light of some of the recent experiences. So, but I want this bridge built because I think it's going to be a good thing for the city.
Absolutely. Other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Chief Piper, we're still moving ahead with that bridge. Glad to hear it. All right, we are on item 9. There we go. Consider a proposal for a Riverdale area traffic study. And Mr. Himmer, want to cover this?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this item has been discussed with you on a couple of different occasions. Staff does receive complaints from time to time about many traffic locations up near Riverdale, Menards, Costco, 124th in Riverdale, timing of the signals, and over the past year we've kind of looked at a few of these as isolated intersections. We had a development proposal come in that we did a traffic analysis. Riverdale Station is coming and the traffic analysis for that. So as opposed to going intersection by intersection or development by development, we're going to look at the area as shown on the attachment. It's basically Round Lake on the west, 124th on the south, and the Highway 10 entrance ramps and Riverdale that routes around there. It's a pretty detailed analysis of synthesizing existing crash data and analysis, new information, wayfinding signage, doing internal circulation reviews of the parking areas. I've got, I believe, 6 or 7 different property managers or owners that represent pretty much the entire area up there. I won't say I've got every individual business, but certainly the property management for a considerable piece of this will be involved in this. There will be recommendations for both probably private and public improvements, and the idea is just to try to solve this on a bigger scale, some of which may have to be done by the county, MnDOT, or the city, and some of which may have to be done by the property owners with regard to access, internal circulation, and the such. So the county is participating $5,000 into this. That was part of the JPA for the turnback on County Road 79. The remainder of this will be handled by city, the Riverdale Fund. And with that, I will recommend we move forward with SRF and begin this process. We'd like to start probably with some initial meetings and generating traffic information such that by, say, January or February of next year, we would have some conclusions and recommendations that could be included either. Well, one of the important pieces is trying to figure out the entrance to the Walmart and the Cub over there, because that's going to be part of our turnback reconstruction project that we're already gearing up for next year as well. So that's one critical piece that we have to understand for inclusion in something that we're going to bid. The rest is related to a development and just general circulation through the area. So I'll stand for any questions you have.
Mr. Himmer, under SRF's proposal, under the meetings, it says prepare for and attend up to 2 meetings with business owners in the Riverdale Village area. I assume that means including the property management and the developers. And then the second part of that is it says that prepare for and attend up to 2 meetings with the city staff, county staff, and MnDOT staff as necessary to discuss findings and recommendations of the study. So I guess logistically, how does that work? Do they meet with the owners and then take those and then work it out with the public entities? Or I'm just curious how that works, because then if MnDOT says, oh, we can't do that, we have to do this, then do you have to go back and meet with the owners again, or? I just want to make sure we have the right formula for meetings here, because that's part of the contract that they're agreeing to.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, initially you're going to meet with, and all of these property owners have reviewed these proposals and provided their input. I mean, I said, here are the proposals. Tell me what your concerns, what you think should be looked at. I did receive a little bit of feedback on that, but the intent is you meet with them right up front and you say, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's what you're going to see going on out there. Are there anything special related to your properties that we should know and keep an eye out for or consider in this proposal? We'll get all of that information. At the same time, we'll talk to the county, who obviously maintains all of the signals, and MnDOT on the entrance ramps to say, here's what we're trying to accomplish. We're working with the property owners. What are your issues and concerns related to this? Then they go out and start to put this report back together. They come back with recommendations. That information goes out to the property owners and MnDOT, who then have the ability to ask questions and comment on it, and then revisions would be made based upon that. So you get on the front end what the expectations are, and on the back end what the recommendations and the concerns are related to those, and then that all goes into a final report.
Right. Thank you. Councilmember Grzyskowiak?
I had a similar question. I'll go right on top of that. Would one of those meetings with staff include a presentation by SRF to the council and the staff?
Councilmember Grzyskowiak, I believe that would be something that could be done in the end. If there's a desire of the council to hear what's going on, or have a workshop or some sort of presentation on what that is, we could certainly plan for that. I'll have to look back through the scope, but I'd sacrifice a staff meeting to say that's what you're doing. I think we've talked about this enough with them that they understand what we're trying to accomplish as city staff. And I know we've workshopped this and a few other items related to this. So I guess it's up to you if and when you want to be involved or not involved in how this comes together. And I guess if you have any specific concerns or questions, you can relay them obviously to me or through me, and I'll have those integrated into this. You're seeing the proposal now, so you're at a disadvantage for the county's seen it, the property owners have seen it. I think it's pretty all-encompassing when you look at that graphic that they show, where they intend to generate the information and the types of, I guess you haven't seen what some of the outcomes are potentially, but it's really looking at everything. Wayfinding signage, parking usage, do they need all the parking that they have there? And it's going to be difficult for them to kind of understand that. And it's going to be at the time of the year when we're heading into the holiday season, so volumes will presumably be up. And do you then design for that one time a year thing? Probably not. You're going to be a little less conservative than that, but you're going to get good information and good participation to the extent that they want to be involved. And I guess to the extent you want to be involved.
Right. So rather than giving up one of their staff meetings for us, maybe they would just let us know when that is, and if somebody wanted to attend it just as a spectator to keep up, and maybe that would work.
Any volunteers?
Yeah. Well, maybe you can let us know when it'll be first.
Right. Yeah.
And then Matt can post it if it's going to be more than 3 or 4 of us.
And Mr. Mayor,
I
would assume when you get the report back that that's something we could see at a workshop session, whether SRF needed to be there or not. I would trust that staff could interpret it.
All right. So we're looking for a motion to accept the proposal.
Mayor?
Councilmember Grzyskowiak?
I'll make a motion that the city accept the proposal from SRF Consulting Group to conduct a transportation assessment for the Riverdale area and to authorize execution of the agreement in accordance with the proposal dated October 8th, 2017.
Second.
Motion by Grzyskowiak, second by Geisler. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And that motion carries. And we are on item 10, to consider agreement with the City of Fridley for criminal prosecution services. And Mr. Stemwedel or Melissa, whoever?
Mayor, Council, I can kick this one off, and then if there are any questions, of course, we can get into that. So the City of Fridley approached the City of Coon Rapids a couple of months ago about an idea they had for the City of Coon Rapids to provide criminal prosecution services for them. And so staff met and discussed, sort of policing philosophies, prosecution philosophies, and found out those things lined up well. And so we started to begin to talk about the terms of such an agreement and brought those things to council last week in a work session in terms of what an agreement would look like. Just a couple of high points about the agreement itself. It would be only for criminal prosecution, not for their civil side or anything of the like. There are a lot of workflow benefits to that, in that we would have to hire an additional attorney and admin assistant, so it would give our staff more flexibility for coverage. I'll be on one court calendar eventually, things like that would provide a lot of benefit to them, and some other intangible things like last meeting we brought on a victim services employee through a grant, and that Fridley would come on and they would be able to utilize that position, actually pay for some of the overhead of that that's not covered by the grant. In addition to that, there are things in the agreement that provide sort of a benefit to our bottom line, which of course is a significant concern. I know that's something that came up at the work session last week, as beyond those intangibles for staff, what's the effect to sort of the Coon Rapids taxpayer. And so in that, certainly the agreement itself pays for all of the overhead costs of the employees themselves, the salaries, the benefits. We're charging for things like rental of space in City Hall, for the administration of these positions. So of course it'll involve some of my time, some of Dave Brody's time, some of finance's time to administrate these positions. And so there's chunks of dollars built into the agreement for those sort of things. And in addition to that, they are paying for a portion of that victim services advocate, as I mentioned. And then beyond that, we have built in things like miscellaneous costs in a contingency to provide an additional buffer for those things. The plan at this point would be, if council approves this agreement, that we would start that process with Fridley, and we'd have a check-in at 6 months. And of course, that check would include things like workload for our staff and how it's going, just generically, but also the cost. What are we seeing from how much of our workload is being generated by Fridley, and is this agreement really addressing that the way we expected it to be addressing it, and other intangibles that we haven't thought of yet. And then of course, every year after that, this is being proposed as a 5-year agreement, stable for the first 2 years in terms of the cost, and then a 6% inflator after that to cover things like cost of living increases, health insurance increases, and so forth. And with that, I'll maybe ask Melissa if I missed anything in that rambling. If not, I'll open it up to questions of council.
Mayor, council, I think one of the only things I would point out is it is primarily for criminal prosecution services. We would also do the civil forfeitures, which is in the DWI type cases, the taking of the cars. That's something that's a civil separate hearing. We would take that over, but it is quasi-criminal. Usually they go hand in hand. So it wouldn't be necessarily civil in nature outside of that. I think Matt hit on the high points. I can tell that we've already been working with court administration, if the council approves this, to combine our calendars as of January 1st. Right now, the Coon Rapids calendars are on one day. The City of Fridley calendars are on a different day. So we would just be adding calendars to our month, which would be covered by the additional staff. I can tell the council that our office is excited about the opportunity. We are regularly approached by judges and other members of court administration to say, we wish you could do all of the prosecution. They like the way the city prosecutors from the City of Coon Rapids handle the cases. And so I think that's definitely a plus for us. We have a good reputation up there, and this is another way to carry it forward.
Okay, excellent. Council, any questions? Motion? Crickets? Councilmember Johnson.
To approve the agreement for criminal prosecution services between the City of Fridley and City of Coon Rapids, and authorize the mayor and city manager to execute the agreement.
Second.
Motion by Johnson, second by Wells. Discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I would just say that I think this is a good thing for the city. I think it'll not only be a net benefit in terms of kind of the aspects that Mr. Stemwettle addressed, but also in terms of the administration of justice in the region. And I probably wouldn't be supportive of this if we were talking about a deal and an agreement with a city that wasn't contiguous, but I see there's synergy that's involved, and I think that inures to the benefit not only of Fridley but also to Coon Rapids, and also inures to the benefit of those people in the community who brush up with the criminal justice system. There will just be more consistency, I think, between Fridley and Coon Rapids and how cases are handled. So I'm fully supportive of it.
Excellent. Any other discussion?
Mayor.
Councilmember Skoviak.
I fully appreciate Councilmember Johnson's perspective on this, especially being the profession that he's in, and I also appreciate the time that we spent in the work session with this, but I do remain skeptical, and I just wanted to point out a couple of reasons why I do remain skeptical. One of them is I'm skeptical that there could be a potential conflict of interest between the city of Coon Rapids and the city of Fridley if we're sharing legal services. The other reason I'm skeptical is that right now we don't really have excess resource in our own legal department. So we would be adding resources and growing the size and scope of our own government agency to do this. And so those are some of the reasons that I'm skeptical of this. I do see some of the upside and maybe some efficiencies, but I don't think they're offset with some of the potential conflicts. So I would be opposed to this.
Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Johnson.
If I could just on, just as a kind of a, not a direct response, but to kind of address some of the issues that Councilmember Kraskowiak raises. One of the things that is important in the legal profession, especially with prosecutors, is to be aware of and identify those conflicts as they might arise or exist. And you might recall during the workshop, I addressed that issue with Mr. Brody to see and make sure that he feels comfortable that if the city of Coon Rapids and the city of Fridley do spot and identify a conflict that might exist, whether they have the resources to outsource then the representation of a particular matter to another lawyer that they have a relationship with, and he indicated that they do. So I think the risk of conflicts is really pretty low. The one thing I would say with respect to being at capacity and whether or not we're going to, as the city of Coon Rapids, have the benefit of having a new lawyer that comes on board. I do think we're at capacity right now in terms of things, but I also think that having another lawyer on board will actually help the city of Coon Rapids, because if you can see from the agreement, it is not, the agreement does not require 100% of that lawyer's time to be dedicated to the city of Fridley. So we will benefit from any excess time that is available to that lawyer, and frankly I think there will be some excess time that will be available, and so I think the city will benefit from that because they're not required to just have that person staff just the Fridley stuff. The work will be distributed among the lawyers in the city attorney's office. So I hope that helps kind of allay some of your concerns, but I appreciate them.
Okay. Councilmember Kraskowiak.
Just additional comments. Again, just wanting, again, a little skeptical here that the costs are going to cover the resource and that no additional taxpayer money is going to be spent to help out our good friends over in Fridley. And the other thing is that, I mean, I understand our building here is pretty much at capacity already. If we add another lawyer, it almost seems like we'll have to maybe shift, remodel, or do some furniture acquisition in addition. So again, another reason I'm skeptical.
Mr. Stemmettle.
Mayor, Council, Councilmember Kraskowiak, in terms of capacity in City Hall, we have space available. Certainly there'll be an amount of equipment and some furniture that need to be purchased. That was all included in the agreement that, you know, in order to produce that employee in the building, that we would need some of that cost. With regard to, you know, for us, being able to predict salaries, benefits, those sort of costs is fairly easy. Right? You know, what gets a little more difficult are things like, you know, if there are any miscellaneous costs associated with taking on Fridley's criminal prosecution. From a personnel standpoint, I'm very comfortable with the numbers we've put in there and then sort of the overhead costs we've built into that because we can predict that so easily. For those other costs, that's why we did build in miscellaneous and sort of contingency on top of miscellaneous to give us that buffer. And frankly, you know, we've been upfront with Fridley to say we need that buffer. Certainly they're going to save some money in this, but certainly we don't want to have to subsidize them. And from my estimation, it's clear that we absolutely will not be subsidizing them, and in fact there'll be a a significant contribution to our bottom line that'll make us more financially efficient to produce our own legal services. And so, some of those are the reasons we built in these check-ins at 6 months, a year, and then yearly after that. And certainly if we saw that this was heading the wrong direction, there are some clauses, I think it's 120 days, we'd have to provide notice to them that we wouldn't do it, in a surprise, but certainly maybe as we're approaching the end of a year and say, well, we're going to do this for one more year, but after that's just not working out, so now you've had your notice. Those are the things we're concerned about too, but we think that we're going to be able to track that as we go, and we've got enough of a buffer there, a significant buffer there to absorb some minor fluctuations, and if those become major, then we can either renegotiate or, cancel the deal.
Yeah, I think you're right on with your concerns, but I'm comfortable that we have enough things built into this that if it started to head to a loss, it would be very minimal, and we could either amend it or sever it. And so I think it's, Melissa.
Mayor and Council, I think I can address some of the conflict of interest questions that you had. I know Councilmember Johnson did as well. I'm trying to think in the last 5 years since I've been here, any situation that would have arisen that would have created a conflict. More often than not, we work with the current city prosecutors and try negotiating. Sometimes if there's cases in both cities and that type of things, which does arise because it is a neighboring community, usually trying to negotiate those sorts of things. I can't think of a situation where one has arisen, and as Councilmember Johnson indicated, if there was one, we would conflict it out the same way we do now if a conflict arises within our office, which isn't very often in and of itself. Typically, it doesn't even necessarily cost the city any additional money. We kind of trade favors with another city prosecutor, be it St. Louis Park, Spring Lake Park, or Ramsey, Andover. One of those city prosecutors will handle a case for us, and then we just take the next case for them. So certainly among the municipalities, we've worked out those sorts of things without it having any additional cost or impact on the office.
That was enlightening. Councilor Berger-Skoviak.
If I might then just ask our council, just the other thing that makes me a little skeptical is the data. Is our data going to be secured? Because, in this business, there's attorney-client privileged information, and we're going to have two different entities kind of sharing the same resource. And again, that gives me pause to enter into this agreement.
Councilman Berger-Skoviak, in data, do you mean as far as the computer data, that sort of thing?
Well, systems, confidential data on our constituents versus their constituents, information related to cases that is attorney-client privileged, those types of things.
Okay. So when we work with our City of Coon Rapids Police Department, we have a method that we gather the data, the police reports, we pull it from their system into ours. We have a paperless system. We will do the same thing with the City of Fridley, and in fact, the City of Fridley prosecution is currently using the program that we use, so the transfer of that data is going to be fairly easy, easier than we anticipated even. There is, and the chief might be able to help with this, some talk of a joint agreement among all municipalities to share police reports and that sort of information among all of the different municipalities. As city prosecutors, we, with the other municipalities, cover for one another, be it for the jail calendars. We rotate and we share all of that information. Veterans Court, I'm the prosecutor that handles that for all of the cities, so we have access to that information, and we have an agreement among all of us that that all remains confidential. We certainly wouldn't be giving Coon Rapids Police Department Fridley's information or Fridley Coon Rapids, but most of that information goes up to e-charging with the state and is a system that we would all have access to within our current positions anyways.
Mr. Mayor, might I just dovetail off that and ask you a question? How are you planning on handling data practices requests? Would those be deemed civil in nature? If there's a Fridley data practices request for comprehensive law enforcement data or arrest data, would that be routed through like it normally would, I think, here, through the Fridley Police Department and their data practices officer?
It is my understanding, Councilmember Johnson and the clerk from the City of Coon Rapids is agreeing that that would still go through Fridley, as that would be civil in nature.
Very good. Then the only other information for Councilmember Berger-Skoviak's benefit that really, in criminal prosecution, there may be some limited privileges. Most of the things that are really confidential are attorney work product. They're not privileged in nature. They're things that are created in anticipation of litigation or in connection with handling a criminal case, and that would always stay with the attorney and with the file that's being handled there. So, and that is almost never discoverable. So that's really the only thing that that is really, in some sense, really privileged that wouldn't be discoverable anyway. All the other types of information that you rightly point out, there's public and non-public and private and confidential, are all set out in the Minnesota Data Practices Act. And then we follow the rules of discovery in the criminal rules of procedure. And there are specific rules that relate to the disclosure of that information and to whom it can be disclosed and when it can be disclosed. And I think those rules would be followed regardless of whether Coon Rapids was handling a Coon Rapids case on its own, or even if Coon Rapids was handling a Fridley case on a conflict basis, they would follow those same rules.
And that was the one thing I was going to add, is that when we handle conflicts for other cities, we follow those same rules now.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Geisler?
Yeah, and so I think for me, when we talked at the workshop, security and data privacy, it's more around how are we securing the access to the data. So do I now have potentially people with a Fridley ID that have access into the Coon Rapids systems? And I think we talked that no, they don't, and we don't have any risk of having our people accessing Fridley's data, that it's going to remain separate.
Council member Geisler, that is correct on both ends. So the person that is hired to handle both the Fridley matters and some Coon Rapids matter will be a Coon Rapids employee. And so they'll have the same access that that I have right now to those cases. And I won't have any special access to Fridley, so there would be no crossover in that matter.
Right. And if I can continue,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, just that, so then it's not, you can't get to the Fridley SharePoint sites with the Fridley data or any, and vice versa. So it's more than the actual cases, just to make sure that we're putting our rules and access levels correctly.
Not without a warrant.
I was going to say, that is all correct. And we don't want access to anything other than what we need to do the prosecution, which is what will be given.
Okay. Well, we have a motion and a second, and I think we've had a lot of robust discussion. If there's nothing further, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries with one opposed, Councilmember Griscoviac. Next on our agenda is item 11, to consider introduction of ordinance revising fees for 2018 and set a public hearing for liquor licenses. As a point of interest, the council is being asked to consider the introduction of an ordinance to adjust certain fees for 2018. Fees set by resolution will be presented when the ordinance is considered for adoption at the November 8th council meeting. And the fees for 2018 have been adjusted by the 2017 annual adjustment of 2.75%, with exceptions noted below. And of note, it's the state alcoholic beverages and gambling investigation fee are set by the Minnesota statutes and do not change. There are no new fees for 2018. And we will be setting a public hearing for November 8th, 2017 at 7 p.m. regarding the fee increases for on-sale 3.2 malt liquor, off-sale 3.2 malt liquor, tavern license, and on-sale intoxicating liquor license. Do we need a motion for doing the public hearing, or is that just part of the introduction? Part of the introduction, right? Does council have any questions on that, or should we consider it introduced?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Geisler?
Yeah, I had a question for staff, and I just want to reiterate on this one. That for me, just the cost of living, moving it up every year, moving it up every year, moving it up every year. I'd like to look at how can we be more efficient? How can we look at, do we really need the blanket 3%? And the conversation that I had with staff today is that about every 10 years, so 2009, or 1999, 2009, we do more studies around what is the actual cost, and can we then revise that base, and then we look at kind of that average, moving it up every year, and then at the 10-year mark, we do our little study again to see, can we baseline, and maybe this one doesn't need to go up. And I would, you know, for this one, I will support it, but I want to encourage that we are looking at that and making sure that we are on a regular basis looking at how do we re-baseline instead of just automatically increase.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, I'm sorry. So, wait a minute. I'm on the wrong one here. So I skipped down to 12. All right. So, then we will consider the ordinance to revise certain license fees, service fees, and related charges effectively January 1st, 2018 as introduced. And we will set a public hearing for November 8th, 2017 at 7 p.m. regarding the fee increases for on-site. Oh, we already went through that. Okay, good. Item 12 on our agenda this evening, consider introduction of an ordinance revising inspection division fees for 2018. And let's see, staff is recommending the following changes to the building inspections fee for 2018. The base amount in Table A 2018 has been adjusted by an annual cost of living increase of $1, increase of 2.2% from $48 to $49, and all other fees that are exceptions have also been adjusted by this cost of living increase except for the following changes. Permits for residential replacement of garage doors are now a flat rate of $49 to match the minimum fee rate for a one-trip inspection. And the solar PV installation fee is now a flat rate of $103, which represents the cost of the inspector's time instead of being used on the watt rating of the system. Does council have any questions of this?
Yeah, I got a question.
Councilmember Johnson.
So is that a per door rate, or is that a per inspection rate of however many doors you're putting in? Because if you've got just one 2-car door, is that a $48 or $49 charge versus somebody who has a 3-car garage and 3 doors, making it $150? Do you know?
Mr. Frenelius?
Mr. Mayor, I can attempt to answer that question. I believe it's just for the.
It seems like a yes or no, really.
And I can certainly double check this with our inspection staff, but I believe it relates to just the job itself.
So going out and inspecting the door
related
or
to the
doors?
inspection, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Geisler?
And on this one, I have probably more of an issue than the last one, since those were all flat kind of fees and it was an inspection, where these are fees that are tied to valuations. And, you know, even if we think back to the average house that our representative from Anoka Hennepin talked about at their last bond 20 years ago, it was $125,000. It's now, they're talking $200,000. So valuations are automatically going up, which when I take 3% of a old number, and if that price is going up, I'm getting more money because the valuation is going up for that fee. And if I attach an increase on top of the valuation increase, that to me is something I want to take a look at. I think that starts to get a little too high.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, because you've already got your inflation,
And
your cost of living built in.
To the valuation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mr. Stemwell?
Mayor, Council, I'll just make note that in 2015, there was a fairly substantial review of these sort of fees, the inspection fees and permit fees, and a number of changes were made at that time. Some of them lowered, some of them changed in terms of the style of the fee, and there was comparison to other cities and so forth. And so as a part of our future fee study, certainly we can revisit this. The one thing I'll mention, and Councilmember Geisler's point is very accurate, that when you're talking about values, they're sort of automatic inflators. On the other hand, the 2.125% doesn't, on its face, cover necessarily the personnel costs that go into it. You know, if we have a COLA of 3%, benefits that may go up 10% one year and so forth, that our costs too are escalating at a rate faster than what's being represented there. And so the idea is to sort of have them balance out, and it shouldn't be an automatic. I completely agree with that, but that there has been, it's been a while, but there has been an effort to sort of tie that to actual costs and not just inflate it by a particular number every year.
Councilmember Geisler?
Yeah. For me, you know, we need permits. We want to make sure things are done to code and that they're safe and that the right things are being done. At the same point in time, I don't believe it should be a significant profit center, right? We need to be able to cover the costs of what we're doing and making sure that people are safe and the right things are being done. And so if we can look at the metrics and things that we're collecting to say, well, what's our fee revenue? What is our basic, costs? Because I think within our budget structure, we already have allocations from overhead, and you can get to a fully loaded cost on a resource to be able to start to look at that, to be able to say, where are we at on par for the revenues coming in for these fees versus what resources we're spending on them, and to try and keep us within a range and be able to give us that data, I think would be really good.
Do we risk collusion or something if we look to other communities to see what they charge for permits? And the only thing I'm wondering about is you've got a contractor that's working in 4 contiguous communities. It seems like there should be some similarities in permit fees because the jobs are kind of the same. I'm just kind of wondering, Ms. Legg? I think the attorney was actually wanted to answer something.
No,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Can't see her from here. But in any case, yes, we did look at other cities, and yes, we can look at other cities. So when they did this in 2015, that is exactly how we started. There are fee schedules that are all over the board. So when the building inspector actually did this study in 2015, he looked at the structure that was the most kind of conducive to the way we operate, and then looked at what other cities charge for their base fees and tried to start out less than that. So we can look, and there is a rate study that's published by the AMM for the other rates, but we can call or look on websites and often do that, just like we do for water and sewer rates and things like that, just to make sure we're in line.
Thank you.
Yeah, to me, I would just like to make sure that some of that information, because 5 years ago I wasn't here. I don't, and if it was even a year ago, did I remember the exact pieces of information? And to be able to get that on a regular basis to us would be appropriate when these things come to us. I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, we will consider this introduced. The ordinance establishing permit and inspection fees for the Building Inspections Division as authorized by Minnesota Statute Section 326B.1221, effective January 1st, 2018. And then lucky 13, the last item on our agenda, consider introduction of an ordinance revising the utility franchise fee. Mr. Stemwell?
Mayor, Council, I'll just introduce this, then I will ask Ms. Legg to maybe describe the specifics. But franchise fees has been a discussion that has kind of been ongoing over the last year and a half or so, maybe even a little bit longer than that, both with this council and the previous council. And it's taken a couple different iterations depending on the information we've began to learn over time. Last we talked about this in terms of a wide dialogue was back in April. And at that time, we were looking at sort of a subsidy model to address an issue that council felt like should be looked at, or at least there was consensus to look at it, which related to really the super users of electricity in the city. And there are a small handful of users who use so much electricity that our 4% fee on that became really just cost impactful for them. And that as they were looking at expansion in the city, they started to feel like that was going to be an inhibitor for them to grow, and also felt like the purpose of this fee was basically for them to use the right of way, and at a certain point they've sort of paid their fair share, so to speak. So council set out to kind of address those issues, and the way we found that addressed it probably the best was what we called the Shakopee model. So about this time last year, the city of Shakopee passed a new franchise ordinance that included a circuit breaker. And in their case, as what we're proposing, is at $950,000 of gross revenue, that their flat fee would be in place up to that amount, and then afterward, there's just a 0.5% fee for anything beyond that. So it really addresses those very small number of users in town who are using so much electricity that our fee becomes such an onerous part of their budget. And it took some time for us to work that through. We did build into the 2018 budget an amount that would account for the revenue loss that we would expect because of that circuit breaker. So we reduced the franchise fee revenue in the general fund to account for that, and began to talk then more earnestly with the utility companies about how this would be implemented, and kind of here we are tonight with that ordinance before you. So I guess maybe I covered most of it, Sharon, but if there's anything else you want to share.
It seems like it'll address the really large users. I mean, at $950,000, they've paid $38,000 in franchise fee, and then for the next 950, then it'll be like $4,750 or something. So, yeah, you would think that would make them really happy compared to what they're paying now, and a fairly minimal impact on our budget in the big picture.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, I would agree that all things considered, this is a fairly minor change to our franchise fee ordinance, in that it really will address that major concern for that small group of businesses. And in fact, you know, we've been hearing from them recently even that this is still something on their mind and that they'd like it considered. So I think the timing was good that this ordinance be introduced, and that's it.
And it's a really long process.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, go ahead.
Mayor, Council, I should have said that, yes, what we're doing today will start the process. And so what happens from here going forward is that tomorrow we will send the utility companies a letter that says we intend to consider a change to our franchise fee, and we have to wait 60 days before that's formally considered. If in 60 days, I believe it's second meeting in December, we consider that and it's approved, we have to send them another notice, which starts another 60-day clock per our franchise ordinance that gives them time to implement the change. And actually it says something like 60 days or the first of the month following a billing cycle, so it might be a little 60 and change sort of thing. In our discussions with them, Ms. Legg has communicated to them sort of what our timeline is, and they feel like that, you know, they can work within that and there shouldn't be any other unforeseen delays. Some of this is a little bit new to them as well, in that they have worked with this sort of ordinance in Shakopee. And then for the bigger utility company like Excel, it's something they can maybe more easily manipulate through their software systems. For others, it's more of a manual thing. The good news is we don't expect that any businesses would be impacted by this outside of the Excel zone. And so really we're talking about one area, and they've kind of got an approach to make it work up front.
Excellent. All right. Council have any questions? Otherwise, we are going to consider the ordinance amending the public utility gross earnings tax introduced and set a public hearing for December 19th, 2017 at 7 p.m. All right. We are up to the open mic public comment. You've been here all evening. Are you here for open mic? No? Just because it's so much fun? All right, well, moving past open mic then, we don't have any reports on previous open mics. Other business?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Gatzler.
I'll take the calendar items, right? So we've got, this is our last meeting of the month, since it's a 5-week Tuesday. We've got on Sunday the 29th, the Spooky Skate at the Ice Center. So lots of fun you can have over there. November 2nd, the Senior Center is going to have their bazaar and flea market, so come out for that. And then we will not be meeting till a Wednesday, because the next time there will be a voting happening. So that's really the school board referendum and school board seats, I think, is all that's on our, and I'm sure Ms. Lensmeyer will correct me if there's anything other on the ballot other than the school board.
No, there isn't.
Okay. So go vote, or vote now.
All right.
That was all I had.
Mayor, Council, I just want to clarify in person that there will be a work session next Tuesday, the 24th. The following Tuesday, we will not have a meeting. That's Halloween. I don't want to go there on that night. I made a joke about, I had a meeting on Valentine's Day. I don't want to have it on Halloween. And I like my job. I don't want to lose it. So I just did want to clarify that, because originally I had talked about we may not need to meet on the 24th, but we have a topic that we think is timely and can be addressed at that date. So.
Sure. All Any other business to come before council? What's the Blue Ox record? Do we know? Still 5-0?
2 out of the 3 games, maybe all 3 last week.
Mayor Council, I believe in Chicago, they went 2-2-1, something like that, and so they were at a Chicago showcase and did fairly well, although obviously ran into some tough competition. But I think locally they are still undefeated, so we're going to go with that. They beat the Blue Ox, or the
Moose.
The Moose, yes, sorry.
All right, well, if there's no other business to come before council. Councilmember Griscoviac?
Second.
Motion by Griscoviac, second by Johnson. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We're adjourned.